The red light's on?
Yep.
Yeah. You can't stand in front of it.
Ooh, sorry. Hello, everybody.
Cheers, sorry.
Has anybody voted? Are there any ballots in there? In the box? Nobody. Oh, good. Thank you. I worked hard on it. I don't like public speaking. Do you like public speaking? What happened? How did that happen?
I don't much. I find that it usually goes okay. Even though I dread it.
Yeah, that's usually what I find too, but you know, like there's always that time that it doesn't. Because every now and again, it really does.
You're very sympathetic on it.
It's true, it's a friendly crowd.
We do get feedback.
How are you? Oh, thank you. Everyone should be a little
No,
more.
you need to be like flat against the wall.
Yeah, I will.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want you to block me, you.
Exactly. I know how important that is.
Who's reading? I'm sneaking up for pictures.
Who's reading?
Yeah.
Actors.
Of what? How do we know that?
Well, two of them, one of them is Dave Rosenbach. Many people know. And one of them,
Known by many.
one of them is a friend of mine. So actually, at first, it's I'm just going to make an introduction to one who's going to come up and make some remarks, and then it's going to be the reading. So there's really no reason to take pictures of me.
I do.
There's no need.
Are we having an issue?
To be out of frame.
That's so funny because I remember one of my early memories. It was like one of the choir classes or something when you were charged with like making people answer interviews.
It's different though. That's the
You
one
were
that's
so
one or
comfortable
two
with
on
that.
one.
So you don't mind introducing yourself to
Much more
someone.
different.
But those are different for you.
Yeah.
I have both anxieties. I always thought they were the same. So you're.
Ready? All right.
When my bag got stolen, it was when somebody was at the party, so it was like wandered in and wandered out again.
Are we ready? Or should I?
Hello? Hello, Miropa. Quiet, please. Attention. Hi. My name is Andrea, and I am so excited and happy to welcome you here to the launch of Gwen's book, Men Beware Women. Thank you so much for coming out. First of all, I would like to thank Vinny and Nicole, our hosts here at the Monroe Pub. We could not have conjured up a better location for this event, and we are so grateful to you for your hospitality and flexibility in working with us, so thank you very much. I also want to draw attention to this gentleman right here in the front, Mark Troxler. Mark is here representing the Sloop Betty Vodka Distillery based in Maryland. Sloop Betty is a small distillery. They are making organic and kosher and anything else vodka that is also delicious.
Yummy.
Exactly. And right now, they currently are not in the New York market, so I'd like to encourage you, all of the drinking establishments that you frequent, please request Sloop Betty to be served. Marcus, you are mixing up the signature cocktail from the book, Men Beware Women. Right now, it is known by the rather poor moniker Tim's Cocktail. However, this is where you come in. We're running a contest, so take a sample of the drink. Enjoy it, think about it, put on your thinking caps, and vote and nominate a name for Tim's Cocktail. Around 4 o'clock or so, we're going to impanel the Brooklyn Book Group to judge said entrance. And the winning entry is going to receive a great gift bag with a bottle of Sloop Betty, a bottle of Ribena, so you can make this cocktail at home and for your friends, and a signed copy of Men Beware Women. If you have not yet purchased Men Beware Women, shame on you. But you can rectify that now. There is a booth right up there that is being manned by Catherine and George. You can purchase your own copy or a copy of For Friends for $15, so please do that. And make sure to pick up a bookmarker 5 for promotional purposes and for all your bookmarking needs. I think that's all from me. I just want to bring up Gwen now. We are so proud of Gwen. If you haven't read the book yet, you're really in for a treat. It's a great accomplishment. And like Gwen, it really displays a love of England, great empathy, great attention to detail, and great wit. So without further ado, Gwen Thompson.
Thank you all for coming out. It's great to see everybody here. Before I introduce the actors who are going to perform some scenes from the book, I just wanted to add a note about the cocktail naming contest. Namely, be sure to write your name on the back of your ballot so we know who to give the prize to. But don't write it on the front. We don't want to influence the judges in any way. This has to be fair. I would also like to thank Andrea and Tom for organizing this wonderful event. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, if you want something right, do it yourself. That's totally bogus. If you want something right, find people who know how to do it well and get them to do it. So I'm really happy that I know people who can put something like this together. And so I would also like to thank Daryl for bringing the sound system and all of these great photographers here, Marge and Annabelle and Alan and Adam. We've got all kinds of photography going on, so this is great. So we're going to present a few scenes from the book for you, and again, I don't count dramatic reading as one of my skills, so I found people who do count that among their skills to perform the book for you instead. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them before they perform for you. Many of you here today already know Dave Urbach as you know Dave as the general manager of Manhattan Choral Ensemble, where he and I have sung together for many years. What you may not know about Dave is that he studied acting with Elaine Stritch at the Stella Adler Conservatory, and he has appeared in numerous New York City area theatrical productions from Hoboken to off-Broadway. It would probably never occur to those of you who know Dave to cast him as a Ku Klux Klansman. The fact that he was terrifyingly convincing as the Reverend David Marshall in The Foreigner says it all about his acting. We also have Nicole Palmer. 2012 was a landmark year for Nicole as a singer. First, she made her Carnegie Hall debut as the soprano soloist in Handel's Messiah, and then she made her Lincoln Center debut in Alice Tully Hall as the soprano soloist in Bach's Christmas Oratorio, all in the same week. She also won the Best Baroque Performance Prize and the Best Classical Performance Prize in the New York Oratorio Society's annual competition, But she's not just another pretty voice. What sets her apart in the concert hall and on the opera stage is her background in theater, where her favorite roles include Gooch in Mame, Lavinia Penniman in The Heiress, Sister Robert Ann in Nonsense, and the Mad Hatter and the Queen of Hearts in Alice in Wonderland. We also have Kiri Parker. Kiri is a mezzo-soprano whose career path reads more like something out of Lemony Snicket's series of fortunate mishaps. She won a choral scholarship to the Queen's College at Oxford, but then she dropped out of Oxford to become an opera singer. She completed her Master's of Music at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, but then she didn't get into the Guildhall Opera course, so instead she moved to New York to study at Mannes. And then she got an audition for City Opera, but we all know what happened to City Opera. So, meanwhile, during the economic downturn, Kiri lost some roles that had previously been offered to her, but she got heard by her current agent who offered to represent her on the spot. You get the idea of how her life works. So, if the Mayan prediction had come true and the world had ended on December 21st, it probably would have been all to Kiri's advantage. And lastly, we have Lee Ritchie. Lee is a professional actor, creative director, and voiceover talent who's appeared in over 30 feature films and many television shows. So you may have seen him as William Paley on Infamous, or you may recognize him as J.R. Ewing's bartender on Dallas. But if you want to sample our theme cocktail, you need to talk to Mark. So without further ado, I give you the cast.
Michaelmas term 1990. Malcolm kicked open the door to his assigned room and saw that he would have to unpack in order to enter. There was not enough floor space for himself and his luggage. When he opened the closet door, it grazed the back of the desk chair. The slatted shelves inside were nailed down unfinished amid a network of hot water pipes and cotton candy insulation. When he threw his clothes inside, they caught on splinters. He squeezed past the desk, tripped, and foresaw a year of barking his shins on the portable electric fire that was the only source of heat. A plain white bookcase was crammed in alongside the low single bed. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling. There was nothing else. The walk-in closets in his mother's New York apartment were bigger. The row house his room had been tacked onto as an afterthought was old by American standards. Worked into the diamond pattern of the gable in contrasting colors of brick was the year 1885. The neighborhood, 6 streets and 2 pubs, was an island ringed with canals, accessed by a humped stone bridge he'd crossed in the back of a big black cab with lots of legroom. Jet-lagged, dehydrated, all he wanted to do right now was sleep. But the director of the foreign exchange program had invited new students to a welcome reception in a similar row house across the street. Her blonde hair was sprayed stiffly into place like a helmet, and her front room had a sweaty, tropical feel with too many plants and wallpaper that emphasized pea green. There was a good deal of bad wine, and by the time it was gone, it seemed imperative to all present to take a moonlit stroll along the canal, down the muddy towpath winding into town. Thus, Malcolm's introduction to Oxford took place drunken in the dark. All he remembered afterwards was an Australian asking him for directions to Carfax. Now that he was sober, Oxford's orientation was self-evident. The 2 main drags ran east-west and north-south, crossing in the town center near Carfax Tower the Australian couldn't locate last night. There were pubs on every block, not just the kinds of blocks where bars would be in the States, and Blackwell's bookshop, in its various incarnations, occupied most of Broad Street. Boots turned out to be a pharmacy, not a shoe store. And Lloyd's could either be a bank or a pharmacy, which was called a chemist's. When Malcolm opened an account to deposit his traveler's checks, he was issued something that looked like a credit card but behaved like an ATM card, and a checkbook with stubs instead of a register, something he'd read about but never seen. Yet, he'd read so many books set here, England looked more or less as he'd imagined. The red buses, mailboxes, and phone booths, familiar, not foreign. Preparing for the academic year at Oxford entailed purchasing a collapsible Chinese paper lantern to shade the bare bulb in his bedroom, submitting 27 passport photos to various organizations that wanted to keep tabs on him, registering as a resident alien with the Thames Valley Police, and signing his name to a statement in which he swore never to kindle any flame within the Bodleian Library. He blundered into the covered market in search of a sandwich. When he blundered into the covered market in search of a sandwich, he found himself face to face with a row of dead rabbits hanging from the ceiling next to carcasses more difficult to identify. Pheasants? Not so different from the headless ducks on display in Chinatown or the bloodied cobblestones in the meatpacking district. But the air in England was unlike the air in America. Damp and thick with scent like spring, it tugged him towards the brilliant squares of green glimpsed through the college gates. Unlike New York, Oxford's oldest buildings were the biggest, the converse of skyscrapers funneling human energy inside to be intensified. Each college quad, once you got past the porter, an oasis, its deep calm contagious. On Friday in Northweek, Malcolm rode a midnight blue used Rally 3-speed down the High to the Freshers' Fair in the examination schools. He hadn't seen a 3-speed in America since mountain bikes took over, but here they still predominated, making the rounds of the display tables and booths, dwarfed by the cavernous, echoing halls, seemed as good a way as any of examining the female freshers. So he wrote down his name and college on the mailing lists of a dozen Oxford societies with interesting-sounding names, and extricated himself from their less interesting-sounding representatives. When this proved tedious, he wrote down an assumed name and college to speed his getaway. He could have spent every evening of the first 2 weeks of Michaelmas term at a different freshers' drinks party sponsored by one student society or another in hopes of swelling their ranks, but after a blurry weekend of box, settled down to concentrate on crew, which the English called rowing. Tryouts were not so much different in England. How's your time on the erg? How far can you run? How fast? How many sit-ups and chin-ups and push-ups can you do before collapsing? And he was still fit from a summer spent sculling and playing tennis. Once he'd established himself as a serious contender for a seat on his college's first 8, the student society's term cards and handwritten invitations that filled his pigeonhole in the porter's lodge got filed under the bed. Malcolm's literature tutor had rooms in college overlooking the main quad, where the lawn, already a striped crew cut, was getting a trim from a man pushing a mechanical mower at a pre-industrial pace. Its rusty chirps were the only sound within medieval walls thick enough to absorb and deflect the modern street noise outside. On his way round the perimeter, Malcolm counted 4 keep off the grass signs and 2 bulldogs who looked ready to enforce them. That must be the secret to Wimbledon, he thought. If there's one thing they get right here, it's grass. Did it glow like the Emerald City despite the cloud cover, or because of it? The steps of the stone staircase were worn smooth and shallow in the middle from centuries of student feet. Malcolm knocked once, got no answer, and knocked harder. The door opened.
Hello, you must be Mr. Forrester.
Malcolm glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to find his father behind him, then realized that his tutor was addressing him and shook his outstretched hand. Professor Barraclough was a white-haired bear of a man whose Thursday wardrobe consisted of a blue checked shirt with one of the collar points turned up, a moth-eaten gray sweater, and dark woolen trousers in need of an iron. He ushered Malcolm in ahead of him.
Do sit down.
All the chairs were very low to the ground, and all the windows very high up on the walls. Professor Barraclough put on a pair of half-glasses and squinted down the full length of his arm.
I have a piece of paper here informing me you wish to study Shakespeare. Plays or poems?
Plays.
Perhaps we'd better establish straight away which ones you've read.
All of them.
Oh,
He raised his eyebrows.
no harm in reading them again.
I know. I have.
Secretly planning to be an actor, are you?
No, don't have the face for it.
Professor Barraclough took off his reading glasses for a better look.
I should say you had.
Facial expression.
Malcolm said.
This is the only one I've got.
Not terribly expressive as expressions go, is it?
Professor Barraclough set his glasses down atop a pile of desk debris they immediately slid off.
Presumably you have no objection to sitting in the audience?
No.
Right.
He clapped his hands together and stood up as the piece of paper fluttered to the floor.
We shall be sending you to London and Stratford then regularly. You can't have seen them all done in the States in any case?
No.
Very well, you should simply reread whatever currently playing and write your essays on that.
He rested his hands on the one corner of the desk, not buried under an impending avalanche of books and papers.
Are you equally familiar with the Jacobean dramas?
No, once I got hooked on Shakespeare, I didn't want to read much else.
Do you good then. Jacobeans are altogether different, and as it happens, there's a student company putting on Milton in London at the weekend. Why not run up and see that as well?
He turned away to dig for something on his desk, then faced back round.
It's quite the funniest tragedy I've ever seen.
At the play, Women Beware Women, Malcolm laughed out loud, glad he hadn't spoiled the jokes by reading them beforehand. Students or not, the acting was superb, especially Bianca, who carried a calculated swivel in her step and a gaze of seraphic intensity down the full trajectory from innocence to corruption to remorse. She's not even that pretty, he thought, when he got a closer look during the curtain calls. All the more impressive. Then, what the hell, it worked for that Duke in the play, didn't it? He pushed his way against the exiting tide, checking the program for her name, and followed some people who looked like they knew where they were going through a side exit and down a dark claustrophobic corridor toward the sound of the cast undressing backstage.
I say, where can I find Emma?
He asked the body next to him in his best British accent. Third door on the left, a gravelly voice answered. Got a fag?
Sorry, don't smoke.
He rapped on the door, then opened it. Emma Beresford was already out of her costume and into street clothes, still swabbing off her makeup.
Who the bloody hell are you?
Methinks there is no spirit amongst us but what divinely sparkles from the eyes of bright Bianca. We sat all in darkness, but for that splendor.
She dropped her sponge.
You don't mean to say you've read the play before?
No, I will now, though. Good stuff.
Yes. But you're not an actor at any rate. Not a good one. You just said the line. You didn't look it.
No, I'm not an actor. I've just got a good memory.
God, what a waste. It takes me ages to learn lines.
Maybe because you do look them. That was brilliant how you foreshadowed Bianca's social elevation physically.
You noticed, did you?
She reached up to release her hair from its smooth bun. It bounced down, light brown and curly.
Oh, your Duke was brilliant, too. They all were.
He's gay, you know.
Of course he is.
Do you care?
She glanced up at him sideways, and he was forced to revise his opinion of her looks.
Do I care?
If you did, I could pass the word along you'd inquired.
No, nothing so complicated. I'm here to pay tribute to you. Any suggestions on how I might do that?
Well, you could take me around the corner for a pint once I've got my face off. Have a seat, if you can find one.
She returned her gaze to the mirror, and Malcolm leaned against a conga drum draped with a ripped piece of textured olive green velvet. He could see how it would come in handy having a pub round every corner.
Odd play for a tourist to turn up at.
Emma sponged at her eyelids.
I thought you Yanks, well, what's been keeping the mousetrap running all these years?
I'm not a tourist. I'm here for the duration.
Of what?
The academic year.
Here in London?
No, Oxford.
She raised a brush to her hair.
Have you got a name?
Unfortunately.
Why? What is it?
He told her, and she said,
What's so awful about that? I must know half a dozen Malcolms.
Well, I came to the right country then. Does the corner pub serve anything besides beer?
She turned and stared at him.
There's always cider.
Yeah, what else?
Scotch, of course.
He shook his head.
Can't stand the stuff. Tastes like smoke.
Or gin.
There isn't enough ice cubes in all of England to make a decent gin and tonic.
She put the brush down.
Are you sure you're in the right country?
Thank you. Now, if you... Now, if you want to know what happens next, and you don't know, first booth, right there. See George and Catherine.